When she said those words, "We got married yesterday," I felt something shift inside me, like the sound of glass cracking under pressure. I smiled, but it wasn't real. My lips moved, but my heart didn't follow. I remember standing in my own kitchen that morning, the kettle hissing on the stove, the faint smell of jasmine tea in the air. My son, Amir, had just brought his friend to meet me, finally, after months of promises. I was nervous, happy, even a little proud. It had been years since he'd brought anyone home, but when the young woman, Sarah, sat across from me, holding Amir's hand, I sensed something off. She was polite, yes, but her smile was the kind that hides something sharp beneath. Her nails were neatly painted, her words measured, and yet every sentence felt like it had been rehearsed. Still, I told myself not to overthink. I'd waited too long for this moment, to see my son happy again. So I asked the question any mother would, "So, when's the wedding?" She looked at Amir, then back at me. A small smile curled on her lips. "Oh," she said lightly. "We actually got married yesterday." For a second, the room went silent. Even the kettle seemed to stop its noise. I thought I'd misheard her. Surely she meant engaged. Surely Amir would laugh, correct her, say it was a misunderstanding. But he didn't. He just squeezed her hand tighter, avoiding my eyes. That's when the realization hit me. They had done it without me. My only son. My late husband's legacy. My heart walking around outside my body. Had gotten married without even telling me. I don't remember sitting down, but I found myself in the chair by the window, staring at the teacups. The steam rose and vanished before my eyes, like something fragile disappearing too fast. Normal life / setup before all this, life had been simple. I lived alone in the same small house Amir grew up in. A pale yellow house with creaking floors and a rose garden that refused to die. No matter how many seasons passed, Amir worked in the city, a software engineer, quiet and driven. After my husband's passing 5 years ago, it was just the two of us. I never pressured him to marry. I trusted he'd know when the time was right. He'd call every night, even if just for a minute. "Mom, I'm home," he'd say. "How are you feeling? Did you take your medicine?" It wasn't much, but it meant everything. I cooked for him when he visited, kept his old room just the way he left it. His trophies from school still lined the shelf. His father's watch still sat on the bedside table, ticking faintly in the quiet house. Then one day, the calls slowed down. Once a week. Then once every 2. When I asked, he said work was busy. When I joked that maybe there was a girl, he laughed, but too quickly. I tried not to worry. A mother's job, I told myself, is to trust, but small things began to change. He started avoiding family gatherings. His cousin's wedding, he said he was sick. Eid, he visited only for an hour, then rushed back to a project deadline. I convinced myself he was just busy, that city life had its own rhythm. But deep down, I felt it, something was pulling him away, and now, here I was, sitting across from the woman who had taken him away completely, without warning. Without a word, Sarah poured herself some tea like she belonged there. "I hope you're not too surprised," she said. I am," I admitted. My voice was calm, though my heart was pounding. "But I suppose congratulations are in order." She smiled again, tight, polite. "Thank you." It was a small ceremony. Very private. Private, that word stung. I glanced at Amir. He still hadn't said a word. His eyes were fixed on the tablecloth, his jaw clenched. "Amir," I said softly. "Why didn't you tell me?" He exhaled, finally looking up. "Mom, I wanted to. But things happened fast. It just felt right." "Felt right?" I repeated. "Without your mother there?" Sarah touched his arm lightly. "We didn't want to stress you, Auntie. You've had health issues. We thought it would be easier this way." "Easier for whom?" I wanted to ask, but I bit my tongue. Years of teaching myself grace and patience held me back. My husband used to say, a woman's dignity isn't in silence, but in choosing when to speak. So I didn't raise my voice. I smiled. I nodded. I congratulated them both and even offered sweets. But inside, something had cracked. They left after an hour. Amir hugged me, stiffly. Sarah gave me a kiss on the cheek that felt cold, and when the door closed behind them, I sat in the quiet and finally let myself cry. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan whirred softly, casting shadows across the walls. I stared at the photo of my husband on the dresser, the man who'd always believed family meant everything. Can you believe this, Ahmed? I whispered. He got married without us. Without you. The next morning, I made tea again, out of habit. I set 3 cups on the tray before realizing there were only 2 of us now. And even that felt uncertain. In days passed. Amir didn't call. When I tried, he didn't pick up. When he finally did, his voice was distant. Sarah's been busy. We're settling in. Settling in. Where? He said they'd found a small apartment near his office. He promised to visit soon. But soon stretched into weeks. I busied myself with chores, gardening, charity work, cooking for the neighborhood kids. Anything to fill the silence, but every time I passed his room, I felt that hollow ache again, and every night, before bed, I found myself replaying Sarah's words in my head. We got married yesterday. There was something about the way she said it, like she wanted me to know it wasn't just a fact. It was a statement of power. A declaration, like she was telling me, he's mine now, and perhaps. She was right, but mothers don't surrender that easily. When my instincts tell me something isn't right, I listen, and soon, I'd have a reason to, because one small detail in their story didn't add up. A single inconsistency that would unravel everything, and lead me straight to a truth neither of them ever wanted me to find. It started with something small, an envelope. About 2 weeks after that visit, a thick white envelope arrived in my mailbox. My name, neatly typed on the front, no return address. Inside was a wedding invitation card, not for Amir and Sarah, for someone else, but what caught my eye was the venue listed at the bottom. A small hall in the same part of the city where Amir said he worked. The date? The same day Sarah said they'd gotten married. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. Maybe a neighbor's distant relative used the same hall. But something about it tugged at me, so I looked closer. The event coordinator's number was printed on the bottom. I don't know what came over me, but I dialed it. ***, hello? A woman answered cheerfully. Yes, I'm calling about a booking that took place on April 10th at Royal Orchid Hall, I said, steadying my voice. Can you tell me who reserved it? There was a pause. Ma'am, that event was a private booking for a small ceremony. The groom's name was Amir. I'm afraid I can't share more details. My heart dropped. So they did get married there. But why did I have this invitation to someone else's event, sent directly to me? It didn't make sense. Unless someone wanted me to know. That night, I sat with that envelope for hours, turning it over in my hands, trying to understand. And then, as I studied the handwriting on the postmark, a familiar name leapt out. One of Amir's old friends, Farah. She used to visit our house often back when Amir was in university. Sweet girl, quiet, polite. I hadn't heard from her in years. Could she have sent it? Why? The next day, I called her. When she answered, her voice trembled slightly, like she'd been expecting this call. Auntie? She said softly. I was hoping you'd find out on your own. My chest tightened. Find out what, Farah? She hesitated. Amir's marriage. It's not what it seems. What do you mean? I shouldn't be saying this, she whispered. But Sarah. She wasn't supposed to marry Amir. She was engaged to someone else. Another man. They broke up just weeks before your son. And, she stopped herself. I'm sorry. I can't say more. Before I could ask another question, the line went dead. That night, I couldn't breathe properly. I walked from room to room, clutching my chest, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. If what Farah said was true, if Sarah had been engaged to another man right before marrying Amir, then why rush into a new marriage so suddenly? And why keep it secret from me, the only family he had left? I needed answers. So the next morning, I took the train into the city. The hall Farah mentioned wasn't far from Amir's office. I stood outside it, staring at the cream-colored building, imagining them standing there, smiling, exchanging vows, while I sat at home making tea, thinking my son was just working late. I went inside. The receptionist looked up politely. I'm looking for some photos from a wedding held here 2 weeks ago, I said. Amir Khan and Sarah Malik. She frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am, but that event was cancelled. I blinked. Cancelled? She nodded. Yes, they paid the deposit, but the groom called the day before and said the ceremony would happen somewhere else. We didn't host it here. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Somewhere else? I repeated. Where? She shrugged. No idea. But we still have their booking record if you need confirmation. She turned her screen toward me, and there it was, my son's name, Sarah's name. And under contact person, another name, Nadia Malik. I stared at it. Who's Nadia? She's the one who handled all the payments, the receptionist said. Older woman, well-dressed. Said she was the bride's sister. Sister, except. Sarah had never mentioned a sister. I left the hall with my hands shaking. My mind raced the entire ride home. I searched online for Sarah Malik and Nadia Malik, scrolling through dozens of profiles, faces, fragments of lives. Then, finally, I found them, tagged together in old photos from 2 years ago, Sarah and Nadia, posing in front of a cafe. Comments underneath from friends congratulating Nadia on her engagement to a man named Amir, but not my Amir, another Amir Khan, different face, same name. The world seemed to tilt again. Could it be? Was this some elaborate mix-up? Or something darker? I stared at those pictures for a long time, studying Sarah's face. She looked the same smile, same eyes, but there was something different in her expression. She looked calculating, and then the truth began to form like mist clearing over water. Sarah had been engaged to another Amir Khan. That marriage had fallen apart, maybe humiliated her family, maybe cost her status. And then she met my Amir, a man with the same name, kind-hearted, trusting. She hadn't fallen in love. She'd found a replacement. A second chance, not a new beginning, just a continuation of her story. Rewritten to look cleaner. I sat on my bed. The house dark around me, and whispered to myself. She didn't marry my son. She married his name. The next morning, I called Amir. Mom, I'm busy, he said, his voice tired. I know, I said quietly. But please, come for dinner. Just you. No, Sarah. I have something important to tell you. He hesitated. Mom, please. Something in my tone must have reached him, because he sighed and said, fine. Tomorrow night. I spent the entire day cooking his favorites, biryani, fried fish, kheer. The house smelled of cardamom and onions and memories. I set the table with care, folded his father's old napkin at his seat. When Amir arrived, I saw how tired he looked. His eyes had dark circles, his smile was strained. Everything okay? I asked. He shrugged. Sarah's just been different lately. Moody. Controlling, sometimes. I nodded slowly. Tell me, Beta, I said softly. How well do you really know her? He frowned. Why would you say that? Because, I said, sliding my phone toward him. On the screen were the photos, Sarah with Nadia, and the other Amir. Because the woman you married might not be who you think she is. He stared at the screen for a long time, silent. Then he whispered, Mom? Where did you find this? Does it matter? I said. You deserve to know the truth. He rubbed his face with his hands, trembling. She told me she'd been engaged before. But she said it ended badly. She never said it was another Amir. I finished for him. He didn't answer. Just sat there, broken, eyes distant, and in that moment, I realized, this wasn't just my heartbreak anymore. It was his too. He left that night without saying much. I watched him drive away, the taillights disappearing down the dark street. And though I didn't know what would happen next, I knew one thing for certain, the truth always finds its way home, and soon. Sarah would face it too. For 2 days, Amir didn't call. I tried not to worry. But every hour that passed made my stomach twist tighter. I told myself he needed time to process, to think, to decide what to do with the truth I'd placed in his hands. On the third evening, my phone finally rang. Mom. His voice was quiet, flat. Can I come over? When he arrived, he looked like a man who hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. I poured him tea, but he just held the cup, staring into it. She admitted it, he said finally. I froze. Sarah? He nodded. I confronted her last night. At first she denied everything, said those pictures were old, said the man was a cousin. But when I told her I knew the name of the hall, the date, the registration, she broke down. What did she say? That she never meant to deceive me. His voice cracked on the last word. She said she was ashamed of her past. That her engagement ended in scandal because the other Amir's family called it off. She said marrying me was fate. That she saw it as a sign, the same name, the same initials, like the universe was giving her a second chance. I could see the pain in his face. The betrayal cutting deeper than words could heal. And you believed her? I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. I wanted to, he said finally. But then I found something else. He pulled out his phone, scrolling before handing it to me. On the screen was a photo of Sarah, standing in a jewelry shop, smiling beside a man. That's the other Amir, he said. This was taken a week before our wedding. The date on the photo made my heart stop. She was still seeing him, I whispered. He nodded slowly. And she lied to me even after we were married. Said she was visiting her sister. Said she was helping with work. My son looked up at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen before, not anger, not sadness, but resolve. I can't live like this, Mom, he said. I'm filing for divorce. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Relief and sorrow clashed inside me like two storms. I wanted to hug him, tell him I was proud, but also hold him and cry for everything he'd lost. Instead, I reached across the table and took his hand. You're doing the right thing, I said quietly. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. He nodded, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. I keep wondering if I drove her to this. Maybe I wasn't enough. No, I said firmly. Don't ever say that. People like her don't lie because they lack love, they lie because they crave control. He looked at me then. Really looked, and for the first time in months. I saw my boy again, not the distant husband, not the confused son. But the man his father would have been proud of. A week passed. Then Sarah didn't come around anymore, though I heard through a mutual friend that she'd moved out. Amir started staying with me again for a while, helping in the garden. Fixing the leaky tap his father never got around to, but peace never comes quietly. One afternoon. Just as I was setting out tea, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Sarah was standing there. Her face was pale, eyes sunken, hands trembling. She wasn't the polished woman I'd met months ago. Mom, she said softly. Please. I need to talk. For a long moment, I didn't move. Every instinct told me to close the door, to protect my home from her lies. But something in her voice, a crack, a desperation, made me step aside. She came in and sat at the edge of the sofa, clutching her bag like a lifeline. I know you hate me, she began. And you have every right to. But I never wanted things to turn out this way. Then why did you lie? I asked coldly. Tears filled her eyes. Because I was scared. My family. They humiliated me after the first engagement broke. They said no one would want me again. I met Amir by chance, and when he told me his name, I thought maybe this was my chance to rewrite my story. To make them respect me again. Her voice shook. I did love him. Maybe not at first, but later. I did. I just didn't know how to tell the truth anymore once the lies started. I watched her for a long moment. There was remorse in her tone, yes, but also something else. Self-pity. Love built on lies, I said slowly, is like a house without a foundation. It stands only until the first storm. She wiped her tears. I know. I lost him. I lost everything. I stayed silent. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Inside was a pair of gold bangles, my bangles. The ones I had given her on her wedding day. I can't keep these, she said, setting them on the table. They belong to you. I nodded, wordless. She stood up, hesitated as if wanting forgiveness, but I couldn't offer what she was looking for. Some wounds aren't meant to be soothed by words. Goodbye, Mom, she whispered, and she left. After she was gone, I sat for a long time, staring at the bangles glinting in the fading light. I thought about how easily love can turn into illusion, how even the kindest hearts can be trapped by beautiful lies. That night, when Amir came home, I told him she'd visited. He didn't say much. Just nodded and stared out the window. Then, after a long silence, he said, You were right. Mom. The truth always finds its way home. He smiled faintly, tired. But freer, and in that moment, I realized the most painful stories don't end in revenge. They end in release. Soft music swells, melancholic but warm. The narrator's voice fades with final reflection. Sometimes love isn't the lesson, it's the test, and when truth breaks our hearts, it's only to make room for peace to return.